A furious Canada has put the dagger right into Donald Trump's chest, and they are twisting it, folks.
So MeidasTouch just exposed the massive economic impact of Canada's tourism boycott against Trump, and the numbers are staggering. We're talking $4.5 billion in losses, international momentum building toward a World Cup boycott, and data that shows this movement is accelerating, not slowing down. Let's break this down.
Canada standing up strong against Donald Trump and his despicable regime. The data is in about how effective the Canadian boycott is against Donald Trump and the United States while the Trump regime rules over the United States. And it is devastating for the United States.
This boycott is hitting during Trump's most chaotic period yet. The DHS has been shut down for weeks. Legal challenges are mounting over his emergency declarations, and now America's closest ally is leading an economic revolt. The timing couldn't be worse for an administration already struggling with credibility.
Predictions were that inbound tourism to the United States would drop 10% from Canada. The boycott actually has resulted in a 22% decline in tourism, which resulted in a $4.5 billion hit just on tourism alone, in visitor spending, that is.
Those predictions were conservative by half. When your closest neighbor and largest trading partner cuts tourism by 22%, that's not just economics, it's a diplomatic crisis. Canada represents 20% of all foreign visitors to the U.S., making this $4.5 billion hit particularly devastating for border states.
And now Canada's showing a pathway for the rest of the world that wants to boycott the World Cup right now. And we're seeing the sentiments grow strong throughout the world about boycotting the World Cup in the United States. And we're seeing hotel bookings and other expected economic gains to the United States not materializing.
The World Cup generates roughly $5 billion in economic activity for host nations. If Canada's blueprint spreads globally, we're looking at a potential economic catastrophe that would dwarf the current tourism losses. Major European nations are already discussing coordinated responses to Trump's policies.
It's official. Prime Minister Carney now has a majority government in Canada. The Liberal Party has a majority, and lots of people are saying if he were to call a snap election, he would only expand that majority.
Carney's majority government means this boycott has staying power. Unlike minority governments that need coalition support, he can maintain this policy without compromise. Polling shows 73% of Canadians support the boycott, giving him unprecedented political cover to escalate economic pressure.
The Canadian travel boycott is costing the U.S. economy, and it goes on to talk about how not only has the boycott been effective, the boycott is picking up right now.
The momentum is accelerating because Canadians are seeing results. Every month Trump remains in office, the boycott grows stronger. What started as protest is becoming permanent consumer behavior, with Canadians discovering alternative destinations they prefer over American cities.
Amir Alon, the president and CEO of Longwoods International, quote, "In my 37 years in the travel industry, I have never seen anything like what the Canadians have pulled off."
Longwoods International tracks travel patterns across North America, so Elon's statement carries serious weight. In 37 years, he's seen recessions, 9/11, pandemics, yet nothing compares to the organized, sustained nature of this Canadian boycott. That's historically unprecedented.
By the numbers right here, the number of Canadians taking road trips into the U.S., the most common way of visiting, dropped by 5% last month compared to March 2025, and it's down 35% compared to March 2024. There was a 14% year-over-year decline in air travel from Canada to U.S. in March. In contrast, the volume of Americans visiting Canada in March was up 4% compared to a year ago.
The directional data reveals this isn't economic hardship, it's targeted protest. Americans are still visiting Canada at normal rates, but Canadians are actively avoiding the U.S. while increasing travel everywhere else. This is political, organized, and effective.
For a third consecutive month, more Canadians flew to overseas destinations than drove to the U.S., flipping a long-established pattern. Canadian visitor overseas was up 5% year over year, a sign Canadians are swapping the U.S. for other international destinations.
That pattern reversal represents a fundamental shift in North American travel. For decades, convenience drove Canadians south. Now they're choosing longer, more expensive flights over easy drives to American destinations. Mexico, Europe, and Asia are the beneficiaries of America's loss.
Nearly a quarter, or 23% of Canadian travelers, have canceled a previously planned trip to the U.S., according to a Longwoods International tracking study of Canadian travelers. And a huge hit right here. In 2024, Canadian tourists injected $20.5 billion into the U.S. economy.
Nearly a quarter canceling planned trips shows this isn't passive, it's active resistance. The $4.5 billion loss represents 22% of Canada's total $20.5 billion annual spending here. That's massive economic leverage from America's supposedly closest ally.
But in early 2025, the Travel Association warned even a 10% reduction could translate to a $2.1 billion in lost spending and 140,000 lost jobs in the hospitality sector. But folks, the decline was 22%, more than double that hypothetical drop, which works out to a drop of roughly $4.5 billion in visitor spending.
At 22% decline, we're looking at roughly 300,000 hospitality jobs at risk using their calculations. These are real American workers, hotel staff, restaurant servers, tour guides, paying the price for Trump's diplomatic failures with our largest neighbor and trading partner.
The question is, will this global anti-U.S. sentiment, which Canada has demonstrated why? I mean, it's anti-U.S. because the Trump regime has threatened the entire world.
The distinction matters. This is anti-Trump, not anti-American sentiment. With Trump launching strikes on Iran this week and facing constitutional challenges over emergency powers, international allies see an unstable regime, not a legitimate government representing American values.
Will that translate into a boycott against the World Cup?
If even 30% of international visitors boycott the World Cup, the economic damage would exceed $15 billion. Canada's success proves organized boycotts work against Trump. The World Cup represents the biggest test yet of whether global resistance can cripple his presidency economically.